Hey, I'm Nora from tastypc.tv and today I'm doing a review of Corsair's new Obsidian 350 case. So this is Corsair's first ever micro ATX case, and let's just jump straight in. Starting at the front of the case, we've got this really nice brushed aluminium effect plastic which gives it this really high quality look. So with the front IOs, we've got the headphone and microphone jacks, the restart button, two USB 3 ports and the power button, and this has your hard drive activity LED and the power LED. So we've got two 5.25 inch optical bays, and just like with the 900D, the covers actually extend slightly past the bay area, which makes it look really nice while they're on, but a tiny little bit silly while they're off. So the fans at the front intake air through sides down here, and this front panel is just removable by clicking here and here. Behind that we do have a removable dust filter, and behind that spaced mount either 220 or 240mm fans. Now when I first saw the 350D, I did think it would be just like a miniature version of the 900D and it would carry down with it all the luxury features. But with the 900D, you do get fans in it like the AF140L and the AF120Ls, but in this you do only get OEM fans. So even though I imagine if you're getting this case you'll be swapping the fans out, it's just something I thought I'd mention. Moving on to the top of the case, we've got a large grille and space mount either two 120 or two 140mm fans, or a 240 or 280mm rad. Now because of clearance, you can only fit a thin 30mm thick rad in it, making this case perfect for something like a H100i or a H110. Now I would have preferred it if Corsair had offset the fan mount slightly, more this way and also more towards the rear of the case to allow for thicker radiators. Now as I imagine the majority of people buying the 350D won't actually be water cooling in it, all that will do is decrease appearance for them and make it so the air doesn't flow directly over the motherboard. So I can understand why Corsair haven't done it, but for a water cooler like me it does just kind of suck a little bit. I did also notice that the top of the case is thinner and lighter than something that I'd expect from a case in the Obsidian series. I mean, it makes it better for LAN, but it does just kind of decrease the luxury you'd expect to get, making the build quality something more like what you'd expect to see from like the Carbide 200R, which isn't necessarily a bad thing as long as the price reflects it. I don't actually know pricing yet, so I'm still waiting on Corsair before I know how much it costs. At the back of the case we've got three external water cooling holes and spaced mount 120mm fan, and one has already been included. We've also got 5 PCIe expansion slots and some ventilation, and a Kensington lock mount, although no way to actually secure the side panels onto the case has been included with the case. You've also got a power supply mount and a sturdy removable dust filter for the power supply intake. The side panel has a large window with no fan mounts, which I really like, although the box did say black and windowed, so there is a chance that one day you might see different colour 350Ds and side panels without windows. But to remove the side panel, all you do is undo the thumb screws and it comes straight off. Moving on to the inside of the case, you can fit either a mini ITX or a micro ATX motherboard. So then we've got two toolless 5.25 inch optical bays. Now if you actually mount a 240 or a 280mm rad in the roof, you actually lose part of the top optical bay. You can still make use of it by using something like a short bay res if you're water cooling, or a fan controller, so it isn't actually completely useless if you do mount a rad in the roof. So then we've got this expandable and movable solid state drive mount. I'm not actually quite sure how I feel about it. I mean, it does give you like a really functional way to be able to mount your solid state drives, but it means you don't have any chance of like showing them off. But you can also mount it here. So then below that you've got a hard drive cage which can fit up to two 3.5 inch hard drives toollessly. Now I do actually think that 2 is quite a low number these days, especially for a case of this size. I mean, I understand that Corsair have done it to allow for longer graphics cards, but I imagine a lot of people will be using shorter graphics cards and their cases will be quite empty here. So I would have preferred it if they'd added in, say, a removable hard drive cage, and then you've got the choice of longer graphics cards or additional hard drives. This bottom hard drive cage is removable using 4 screws at the bottom and 2 behind the back of the motherboard tray. But with it like this you can fit graphics cards up to 350mm long. So then looking at the power supply area, it can support up to even the longest power supplies. Although it doesn't actually have like any anti-vibration padding, it actually feels kind of cheap and even rattles a little bit, which isn't exactly the greatest. So now what I'm just going to do is build a system inside the case and then talk you around the finished rig. So, due to time restraints, this NDA lifts today, and also just to save on tubing and coolant, I haven't actually completely fully finished the build, although this should give you a rough idea of the kind of system that's possible. I imagine I am going to be doing this a lot in case reviews in the future, because when I do build a rig, especially if it's one that I'm kind of proud of, to then have to take it apart the next day, sometimes before even getting to turn it on, does just really suck. So I probably will do this again in the future. But I did manage to fit a 240 rad in the front by easily removing the hard drive and solid state drive cages. I did actually manage to fit a monster rad without having any problems with graphics card clearance, although I'm only using two NVIDIA GTX 670 cards with reference PCBs, and they are quite small. Although obviously the thicker you go with the radiator, the less space you've got for your graphics cards. But sadly, as cards are getting smaller nowadays, like I said before, I would have preferred it if Corsair had added an additional hard drive cage, so you've got the option either longer graphics cards or more hard drives. But in the front you can fit either a 120, 240 or 140mm radiator. So then in the top I fit a 240 rad with a set of fans, and I did find that it pushed a lot on the 8-pin CPU connector, but it's still possible to get a fitting in there and a neat looking tube running along to your bay res. Now with this case, if you do fit a 240 rad in the top, you've got roughly 135mm of space to work with in the top optical bay. Now with a 280 rad, you've obviously got less space. Unfortunately I don't have one here though to try out, so I can't give you a rough measurement. Although I did notice with this bay res that it won't actually go in properly, but I did try with a few other bay reses and they went in fully, which tells me that it's a problem with the bay res and not the case. But this bay res is old now and does need retiring. So I imagine if I was actually going to complete the build, I'd probably have one tube running from the back of the radiator straight along here, tucked up above the memory into the res, then just one from the rad to the block, then one arching from the block to the card, one down here tucked under the cables up to the rad, and then just one looping here, although this one will probably need an anti-kink coil. Actually, I would really love to finish this build. You know what, let me know in the comments below if you do want me to finish this build up, because it will actually give me an excuse to keep it around for a few more days and I can get to do another video on it then, which would be cool, because I would like to finish it, although it's kind of a mix of colours at the moment, with like the copper water blocks and the dominated platinums being silver, so I've got no idea what colour coolant I'd go for. Maybe like a goldy colour, I don't know, but I would love to finish it, see how it looks at the end. So yeah, let me know if you'd want to see it in the video and I'll do that for you guys. But also, looking at the space from where I am here, it does look like you could fit a tube res nicely in the bottom here, or maybe even the solid state drive mount. So now what I'm going to do is take you for a look at the back of the case. So the rear panel is completely plain and comes off exactly the same as the other side panel, just undoing the two thumb screws and pulling it straight off. Inside the case you can see how much space you've got to work with for cable management. Now, as I haven't actually finished the build, I haven't done stuff like run through all the cables or mounted the solid state drive, but I am really happy with the cable management holes. I think they're placed really well and the grommets are actually really good quality, which is something that I don't often find. But you do have a large CPU cutout, which is great for obviously getting access to CPU backplates of all micro ATX motherboards, including X79 motherboards, where the CPU is further over. But you do have cable holes for your fan cables over there, which I really like, and you've also got quite a few cable tie mounts. Overall, I have to say, despite the 350D size, it was really easy working in it. So concluding my thoughts on Corsair's Obsidian 350D, I have to say this case has got more features and cooling ability than any other MATX case I've used, and it's actually my new favourite micro ATX case, kind of knocking Fractal Design's Arc Mini off my top spot. But this case does have some imperfections, for example fitting a rad in the roof. If there's already a fitting on the rad, it can be a little bit of a fight to get it in. Also in some areas this case reminds me, it has more of like a Carbide 200R feel rather than a case in the Obsidian series. So what award I give it kind of depends on what its price is. Now Corsair have said that it's coming in around £85 for the plain side panel and around £95 for the windowed side panel, so this case is just under £100. And I think that's a little bit too much. I did actually have a bit of a debate with Corsair about it, as cases like the Arc Mini is around £60 nowadays, and even though this case has more features and uses less material, I think that like £80 is probably a good price for it. You know, just like £10 less. So maybe like £75 for the plain side panel, £85 for the window side panel. But I do want to be really stingy of my awards. I don't just want to like throw them away like other people do. And for that tenner, fortunately it does knock it from the Tasty Award to the Sweet Award. But it is still a really high Sweet Award. I mean, I still recommend it to anyone, and I do still really love the case. And you've got to remember that this is Corsair's first ever micro ATX case. So if this is what they can do now, think of what they do next time. But yeah, that was my review of Corsair's Obsidian 350D. If you like the video, hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe, and thanks for watching.